Hello friends, my name is Vaishali Wankhede. I am assistant professor in Department of Sociology. I am here to discuss Emile Durkheim for the paper Classical Sociological Traditions. Emile Durkheim. Emile Durkheim's methodology in the study of society. Emile Durkheim's approach to the study of society was twofold, substance and method. The substantive aspect was pertaining to the problem of order in society, as mentioned in his book Division of Labor in Society in the year 1893. And later, his methodological aspect was placed in his book The Rules of Sociological Methods in 1895. Durkheim, like Comte, stressed the centrality of empirism and the importance of group in determining individual conduct. Throughout his methodological consideration, he advocated with affirmation the significance of social life in understanding the social phenomena. However, the distinctness of Durkheim from his forebearers were not just scientific methods in the analysis of labor, suicide, and religion, but his analysis of social fact by empirical study of society. In the Rules of Sociological Methods, Durkheim proposed that the subject matter of sociology should be the study of social facts. He further illustrated that the source of our entire obligation was outside every individual, which is beyond every individual. Since the collective life is not derived from the individual life and social processes are distinct and external to individual and independent of his will. When one undertakes his duty as brother, as husband or citizens and fulfill the commitment that one has centered into, one performs obligations which are defined outside oneself and one's action, in law and in custom. Even when they conform to one's own sentiments and one's experiences, their reality subjectively, that reality does not cease to be objective, for it is not he who created these duties. One receives them through education. The symbol of science that one uses to express his thought, the monetary system that one employs to pay debts, the instruments of credit that one utilizes in business relationship, etc., functions independently of the use that one makes of them. If one takes each member of a given society, in turn, the above statement will apply to every one of them so. These are the way of acting, thinking, and feeling which possesses the remarkable property that they exist outside individual consciousness. Here then, this is a category of social facts with special characteristics. They consist of way of acting, thinking, and feeling that are external to individual and are endowed with coercive power, by virtue of which they exercise control over him. Consequently, they consist of representation, representatives, and action. They could not be confused with biological and psychological phenomena which exist only and through individual consciousness. Therefore, they constitute a new species of phenomena, and it is to them that the term social should be given. He elaborates that this category of facts have a very special characteristics. They consist of ways of acting, thinking, and feeling that are external to individual and endowed with coercive power, by virtue of which they exercise control over, and these categories of fact cannot be confused with biological or psychological phenomena. Durkheim here outrightly rejects the argument that sociological laws are only a corollary of more general laws of psychology and social collectivity which enumerate from human nature in general. For him, what constitutes social phenomena are the collection of beliefs, tendencies, practices of a group. According to him, Social phenomena cannot be reduced to individual phenomena. Social processes are distinct in that they are external to individual and independent of his will. A phenomena can only be collective if it is common to all members of society or to average members, and therefore it is general. It is a group condition which is represented in the individual behavior. It is imposed upon them. It is founded in each part because it is the whole, rather than it is being in the whole because it is in the part. So I quote Durkheim, "A whole is not identical with the sum of its part. Society is not merely sum of individuals." Unquote. The social system, though made up of individuals, but their social life is a result of combination of individual consciousness, sentiments and beliefs, thus representing a specific reality which has its own characteristics. In his book, The Rules of Sociological Methods, in 1895, Durkheim emphasized that the aggregation, interpretation and fusion of individual mentalities create a kind of unity which is completely distinct from individuals themselves. This collective product is a society which is no equal to individual, and that's why he says the whole is not identical with the sum of its part. Society is not merely a sum of individuals. The collective product, which is called the society, is not equal to the sum of its part. That is exactly why he laid stress on the analysis of group behavior to begin with collective phenomena and not with individual phenomena. For him, the collective consciousness of a group, its culture, its norms, values, which are external to and corrosive of the actor, forming a structure on the system of its own social facts. Thus, a social facts can be defined as every way of acting, fixed or not, capable of exercising on individual and external constraint. So friends, here we have 4 major characteristics of social facts. First, they are distinct social characteristics and determinant which are not amenable to explanation on either biological or psychological level. For example, are forms of prayer. It involves both biological and psychological synergy. It cannot be understood either biologically or psychologically. It is a combination of both. Second characteristics of social facts, they are external to individual. Social norms, values, morals are binding on individual. It is obligatory for an individual to respect and follow it. For example, to bow before elders, to show respect before teachers is obligatory to the younger generation. Third characteristics of social fact, they are long lasting. That is, they exist for a longer period, outlasting any group of individuals. For example, the social process of transferring knowledge to the next generation is a continuous process for centuries in which human beings come and they go. But the process continues. So it is a long-lasting process. Character 4. They are endowed with coercive power by virtue of which they impose themselves upon him, independent of his individual will. To cite an example, in India, young girls are forced into marriage irrespective of their will and choice. So, in studying the social facts, he insisted that sociologists must seek objectivity. Facts, he argued, can be gathered by observing externally and immediately visible phenomena, that is, religious affiliation, marital status, suicide rates, occupations, etc. In his Rules of Sociological Methods, he argued social facts are things, for him, include all objects of knowledge that cannot be conceived by purely mental activity, that these that require for their conception data from outside the mind, from observation and experiments. Those which are built up from more external and immediately accessible characteristics to a less visible and more profound. Thus, by treating social facts as things, Durkheim draws attention to the significant fact of empirical data in the study of social phenomena. Durkheim also formulated rules in the study of social facts. First, preconceptions must be eradicated. A sociologist must free himself from the commonplace idea that dominates the mind of a layman and must have an objective view rather than subjective approach towards the social phenomena. For example, when we are studying Indian society and a tribal society, a social scientist must free himself from the common notion that tribes are more governed by superstition, as for them the love for nature should not be understood as superstition. Second, sociological investigation must be of group of phenomena having external characteristics. The sociologist has to formulate concept precisely. The researcher must proceed his investigation by conceptualizing his subject matter in terms of those properties or characteristics which can be testified. Next, social facts must be studied independently of their individual manifestation. The objectivity of social facts depends on their being separated from individual facts which expresses them. Since they exist in form of legal rules, moral regulations, proverbs, their inherent motto should be understood. Durkheim has also distinguished two kinds of social facts. First is material social facts and second non-material social fact. Material social fact, as Durkheim puts it, the social fact is sometimes materialistic so far as to become the element of external world. Material social facts consist of A. Society, B. Structural component of society, that is the churches, the state or mechanisms of governance, and C. Morphological component of society, that is distribution, channel of communication and housing arrangement. However, his entire work revolved around non-material social facts. Non-material social facts, they are morality, that is norms and values, collective consciousness, collective representation and social current. Collective consciousness is a sum total of belief and sentiment common to average member of society and forming a system in its own. Now friends, let us understand Durkheim's theory on suicide. His study of suicide began with an article related to suicide and birth rate in 1888. 7 years later, in 1897, he published his formal study in the form of third book, Suicide, in 1897. It was for the first time that the conceptual theory and empirical research was combined to prove social constraint related to collective consciousness. This theory also refuted the earlier theories based on psychological, biological, genetics, climate, and geographical factors responsible for suicide. It also contradicted the imitation theory on suicide. His theory elaborated why one group has a higher rate of suicide than the other. He began with the assumption that biological, psychological, and social factors remain essentially constant from one group to another and from one period of time to another. The difference is due to variation in sociological factors, that is, differences at the level of social facts. His argument was based on the basic premises that different collectivity has different collective consciousness. And this collective consciousness is through different collective representation. Thus, in turn produces different social currents, leading to difference in suicide rate. On the basis of mass data gathered on suicide rates, Durkheim identified 4 types of suicide. First, egoistic suicide. Second, altruistic suicide. Third, anomic suicide. And fourth, fatalistic suicide. He linked each of these types of suicide to the degree of integration and regulation in society. Integration refers to the degree to which collective sentiments are shared. Regulation refers to the degree of external constraint on people. So, he analyzed that wherever integration is low, there's a high rate of egoistic suicide. Wherever the integration is high, it is altruistic suicide. Wherever the regulation is low, it's anomic suicide. And where regulations are high, it's fatalistic suicide. Now, friends, let us understand his explanation on egoistic suicide. As mentioned earlier, lower integration of individual increases his sense of meaninglessness to his group, resulting in egoistic suicide. High rates of egoistic suicide are found in societies where individuals are not well integrated into a larger social unit, and its weak collective consciousness leaves an individual to pursue their private interest in a restricted manner. This lack of constraint on individual ultimately leads to multiplicity of wants and desire. Since all needs cannot be fulfilled, its dissatisfaction increases the chance of suicide. Thus, the stronger the force throwing the individual onto their own resources, the greater the suicide rates in society. He explains it by citing example of Catholic and Protestants. Catholicism is able to have a strong hold and depict high rate of integration amongst its members. It is an idealistic religion. It accepts fate without scrutiny, has hierarchical system of authority, and prohibits variation. Protestants, on the other hand, foster a spirit of free inquiry, permits greater individual freedom, lack hierarchical organizations, and have fewer common beliefs and practices. Hence, the Anglican Church in England depicted a greater degree of integration than the Protestant Church, reflecting in lesser suicide rate than the Protestants. For Durkheim, family, marriage, religion were the powerful counter-agencies against suicide. These agencies hold stronger collective consciousness, and its collective representation leads to higher integration in society, whereas societal disintegration leads to a current of depression and delusion. Next, altruistic suicide. Over-integration of individual to its social group results in altruistic suicide. When social integration is too strong and individualistic feeling is at the bottom, the individual is forced to commit suicide. The individual feels it is his duty to show his dedication and commitment through suicide as a form of self-sacrifice. So, altruistic suicide is a form of self-sacrifice. Traditions, customs, rituals of the particular social setting governs individual life, and in order to achieve higher commandment, he takes away his life. For example, suicide of the followers or servants on the death of their chief or master as an obligatory altruistic suicide. Self-sacrifice or ultimate self-reunification is another form of altruistic suicide. For example, self-immolation by Buddhist monks, self-destruction by army suicide corps, self-destruction in nirvana under Brahmanical influence are variants of altruistic suicide. Anomic suicide. Anomic suicide a state of normlessness and deregulation leads to this kind of suicide. Crisis of collective order and breakdown of regulatory norms results in greater impulse to voluntary deaths. For example, farmers' suicide in Vidarbha. Durkheim stated that the rate of economic suicide is likely to rise whenever the nature of disruption is positive or negative. For instance, economic boom and economic depression. This either type of disruption renders a collectivity temporarily incapable of exercising its authority over individual. It is a situation in which old norms lose its applicability and new norms are yet to be developed, thus resulting in circumstances of normlessness and rootlessness. The abrupt transition such as economic disaster, industrial crisis or sudden prosperity causes deregulations of normative structure. Durkheim finds out that there are high rates of economic suicide in wealthier individuals and divorced persons, since the regulatory norms are put in a flux by the sudden upward change in the standard of living or the breakup of marriage. He observes this type of suicide when there is a loss of regulatory power of religion and government. The last kind of suicide is fatalistic suicide. There is a very little mention of this type of suicide as Durkheim has discussed it in his footnote. This kind of suicide is more likely to occur when the regulation is at its peak and prevalence of oppressive disciplines is at the highest. That means too much of regulation, too much of oppression results in a higher rate of fatalistic suicide. For example, a slave taking away his own life because of the hopelessness associated with oppressive regulations. In Indian scenario, it could be dowry deaths. So thank you, friends. Here we have done with Durkheim's methodology and his theory on suicide. Thanks.